Welcome to this DeepSense Discovery session. My name is Jennifer LaPlante, and I'm the Executive Director of DeepSense. Today, we're going to talk a little about what is DeepSense, what is artificial intelligence, and how we can maybe support you on your own academic career journey as you explore AI, data, and what the ocean sector really means and how it can work for you. Now, I have a colleague that's with me, Lucia, who is a person who loves ocean and has spent her many years working in the ocean sector. And she probably has some great stats that I realize I should have had at my fingertips today. But the big thing about the ocean sector is it employs over 300,000 people in Canada. And right now, you know, Halifax, especially, is in Atlantic Canada, are home to the highest number of PhDs in ocean-related concepts. And I think that highlights that there's some incredibly talented and intelligent people who work in the ocean economy. One of the biggest challenges we have, though, is the technology. So part of what DeepSense does is we're trying to help companies understand how they can better use AI, data, and technology to make everything as smart as possible. Oops, I went the wrong way. So what we do is we help companies understand AI and machine learning, and it's to help them grow and to innovate and to create whole new revenue streams and operations and be a real leader in their area. How we do that is we partner with ocean companies or ocean organizations, and we bring together artificial intelligence researchers, ocean researchers, and we help create really interesting solutions that help solve company and industry problems related to the overall ocean supply chain. The overall goal we have is we want to drive innovation, commercialization, job creation, and economic growth. That means that we want companies to continue to grow and prosper and be bigger and stronger. And we want them to be able to hire the students that graduate that learn that the ocean sector is a real career opportunity. So that when you graduate, you might see a job posting and think, I want to go work for that company in the ocean sector. It sounds super fascinating. We're going to start a little bit what is machine learning, because that's a really important aspect of what DeepSense does. Machine learning is actually just training a machine or a model or a computer system from existing data. So essentially, you have to have lots of great historical data as an input. You train a model, and then you help the company execute and make a prediction using that. So we'll kind of touch on some of the examples of the projects that we've worked on. But this is a very simple, high-level explanation. But the biggest thing to know is the vast majority of companies that we meet with and engage with aren't actually able to do that. We spend a significant amount of time on the data input side. Even before the data input side, there's a huge discussion around the strategic implications. What do you actually want to train? What do you want your model to do? And we did a session like this with students last night, and we talked a lot about how you actually get prepared and skilled up to go work in industry and work for a company. You can do Kaggle competitions and other types of different structures where someone's given you data, they've given you a problem, and you have to go train a model, and you want the model to be the best model. Well, a huge part before you even get to that data input piece and the training model piece is all about what is the organization trying to solve? What is the strategic challenge of the organization? What is the problem? And then what's considered good enough? Because eventually you're going to have a model that comes out for a prediction. And for some companies, 85% accuracy is good enough, but maybe it's not for others. So there's a lot that I'll touch on that we tend to do with companies that isn't just about building an AI model. It's the full spectrum of how do you start with a concept and move all the way through to actually making those predictions. We've worked with a broad range of organizations. And so in our duration, which isn't that long, 2.5 years, we've met with over 60 organizations that are founders, they're economic bodies, they are associations that have members that are companies. But we've also spoken with more than 150 companies themselves, trying to help them move along this overall data maturity path. And the problem that we really run into is that use cases are really hard to find. Sometimes the path to moving and building AI and machine learning is really complex. You need data and you need technical maturity, which not every company has. And so one of the things that's really interesting for you, if you want to engage with us and learn from DeepSense, is how do you help companies do that? Because one day you probably will be inside one of those companies. So how do you help them advance? The questions and the conversations we have internally, or we have with a company, are the same ones you'd have internally as well. If you were, let's say, we're a data scientist at a company. So we work in a broad range of projects. And so the first one I'm going to talk about are data analysis and visualizations. If you think fairly high level, it doesn't have to be deep and complex. You don't have to be using GPUs and CPUs to train really concept AI, deep AI. We spend a lot of time working with companies on simple analysis and visualizations. We're trying to get them to use more advanced analytics, but it doesn't necessarily need to be massively complex. So some of the projects we've done are about taking a lot of data and trying to present new ways for them to interpret and understand that data so they can make smarter decisions. We also work on some projects that are around prediction and redundancy. So let's think about regression models. Regardless of where you sit in your academic studies, you might have learned about how to do a regression. It's fairly simple in terms of a first-year stats class. We've spent a lot of time looking at those types of models, and they might be just as effective as some other really, really deep learning type of model. So examples of projects that we've worked on, one of the ones that is on here that we like to share about is a prediction model. And so we worked with the Port of Halifax, the Atlantic Pilotage Authority, COVE, which is the Center for Ocean Ventures in Halifax. And we helped them build out a model that will help predict values coming off of a buoy. The buoy today is used to help determine wind speeds and wave heights to decide if it's safe enough to move a vessel into the Halifax harbor to unload it, and if it's safe enough for a pilot captain to climb up the side of the vessel. The big thing is it's a one piece of data coming off of a buoy. And so what we did was worked with two different master's students on first making sure it's even possible to build a prediction. And then the second piece is actually trying to flesh out and make a more reliable and usable and transferable model. And part of this is the evolution of the projects that we work on with students, where students get a chance to learn about the domain. So the students that joined on these projects had never worked with buoy data. They'd never known about wind speeds and wave heights. They didn't know that if you have a null value, you can't throw a zero in there, or what's considered an outlier. And so part of what we go through is the evolution of learning about the domain of that data, and then building out a really interesting model and working with organizations on deciding, again, what is considered reliable, what is considered usable. Now, another project that we've worked on, or a couple of others, are around natural language processing. So this is where you're using textual data and you're trying to make analysis and predictions. And so we've worked with companies on using data on things like shipping manifests. There's also lots of opportunities to work on different things like maintenance records. So for example, an organization might have a vessel and they collect things by hand and note improvements and changes and work and logs that are happening. Do the same thing if you had a fleet of vehicles. Maybe you have drivers that write down notes about when things have been maintained, the last time they fueled the vehicle, things like that. They're not necessarily all entered into a complete database, and they're not necessarily analyzed effectively for preventative maintenance and other types of things. So natural language processing allows us to go and try to extrapolate some of that data and use it to predict other types of things that can help a company become a little bit more reliable or make better decisions. We've done other projects too around computer vision, and this might be the same thing you'd use to unlock your phone, any kind of facial recognition. Google likes to take my guinea pigs and put them into a bit of a catalog or album of images and calls them dogs. So maybe not all computer vision is incredibly accurate yet, but we've done projects using computer vision to help optimize and analyze data. And one really interesting project we did was working with a student that was in a computer science program, as well as a student who was in biology doing her PhD. And it was identifying whales. And so it was taking a bunch of images, going pixel by pixel to figure out how many right whales they could find in the images. The student went and expedited all of the work the PhD student was doing because this master's student in computer science was able to build an identification model using computer vision so that the PhD student didn't have to go pixel by pixel of every single image to quickly go and find these right whales in images. So it's all about expediting some of the work. Some of the things we do are helping companies directly, and some of them are part of an ongoing process. Now, when we talk about DeepSense and what we do and how we work with people, sorry, I have a poor load here. Somebody does not know how to do animation. There we go. That would be me. There we go. All right, how we do projects. We first need to find an opportunity. So we need to work with a company. We need to figure out what the problem is, what their opportunity is. And I kind of just went through a range of different kinds of problems because we could go talk to a company that sells underwater imaging equipment, for example, but maybe they never actually see the images. Maybe they take their equipment, they sell their equipment to someone else who then analyzes the images. If we went in and only talked about computer vision, the company might sit there and say, you know what, we never see those images. That's not going to be helpful for us. We can't make our own models for predictions. But if we talked about a range of examples, including preventative maintenance, maybe they actually get logs of their equipment and their underwater camera equipment. Maybe there's ways we can identify warning signs before equipment failure. So having a diverse examples for companies to hear helps them kind of see where they fit within all of those opportunities of how you can use data to make your company a little bit better, smarter, or faster. So we spent a lot of time having lots of conversations and brainstorming. a lot of the times our conversations turn into, let us help you figure this out because you need to collect data over the next 2 years. And then in 2 years, we can probably work on a project. But sometimes they have companies that are well ahead of their time and they've got lots of data and lots of opportunity for us to build out projects. Well, that tends to be where students come in. We try to create real partnerships so that we take that company and their problem. We go and we find an academic researcher and we find a student who's interested in analyzing or identifying that problem. So when later on I talk about how you can engage with us, this is really important because I just gave a whole list of types of problems. So computer vision, text analytics, no one's an expert in everything. So this is where it really gets critical because we want to find a student who has a real interest in spending 4, 8, 12 months analyzing a problem and spending time trying to really solve that challenge. When we find researchers as well, we know that the researchers need to provide some kind of insight and overview because we tend to be developing really novel solutions. These are things that are net new and they're incremental. So we need to have a researcher who is a little bit ahead of their time and knows how to solve some of these problems. What we do is we try to find a real scope of a project. And sometimes we end up scoping a project out before a student's found. And this tends to be because maybe a student comes to us in February, a company comes to us in February, and we spend time mapping out a project. They're ready to go by March. But students aren't always ready to go in March because if they had an internship or co-op placement, they probably already had that lined up by March. And maybe the next student cohort that's available isn't coming till September. So we have a bit of a challenge with lining up students' academic timelines with when companies are ready to hit the ground running. So sometimes what happens is we end up scoping out the project without a student. And I flag this because it might be really interesting for you, depending on where you are in your career path, that maybe you don't necessarily have time and alignment for you to be able to execute the project, but you going through some of these first stages with us and joining us in some of these conversations could be a really good experience. Hearing the language of how you ask questions and probe into what your internal customer really needs, especially if you become a data scientist or you're working with data internally at a company, or you're a researcher down the road, understanding some of those requirements is really important. So being part of these conversations can help you go through the process of knowing how do you ask questions about what you want to get out of data. After we've scoped out the projects, this is when we try to find funding. We apply for MyTax, NSERC, NRC, IRAP, lots of different funding opportunities that we try to do because we want students to end up getting paid for the work that they're doing. But usually what happens if you get paid, it means that the company can have a real great ownership of that IP as well. So you're part of this process, but then we make sure that the company is actually going to be able to use that and commercialize it and make real value. DeepSense is supported by a COA, which is federally funded, the province of Nova Scotia, COVE, the Center for Ocean Ventures, Ocean Frontier Institute, Dalhousie, IBM. All of these organizations want us to continue to grow Canada and make Canada an AI hub of the world is in the ocean sector. And so what we really need to have is some of these deliverable prototypes, concepts, proof of concept, whatever it is. We need to make sure it's going to help a company actually really grow. Once that's developed, this goes into the company themselves. And the best case scenario that we've had happen a few times is that a student that worked on the project then moves into the company. So no guarantees. There's never a guarantee that as a student works for the company, it will turn into a full-time job or full-time career path. But knowing how you created it, what you created for the company, helping them solve a problem could turn into a really fascinating opportunity, whether it's something that goes on your resume to bolster your career experiences, or it turns into something that is a future relationship. And who knows, maybe 5 years down the road, they have even more demand and they're ready to hire you. So DeepSense, as I mentioned, we work on these projects. That's very specific. You have an applied research project, but we have only had a dozen applied research projects and then another 20 higher level R&D projects that work with companies. So we can't help every student with an exact company project because there just aren't enough companies who are ready for demand today. But we have a whole slew of other ways that we can help you. So going back to the applied projects, we try to find as many students and opportunities as we can. And we try to support students with a broad range. So you could be a thesis student who's doing a master's, you could be an undergrad student, you could have co-op placements, you could be a postdoc, a PhD student. We try to work with every student in every cohort. We do run into the issue in terms of timelines, just making sure things align with your course time as well as when the company needs it. But then we also work on a full array of types of projects. And this goes back to the maturity of an organization. So when we work with a company, oops, I mean to do that. Hold, please. When we work with a company, let's take the whole maturity of an organization. So sometimes we want to work, our goal is to work and develop on an AI and machine learning solution, but not every company is there. So sometimes we end up working with companies on looking at the overall strategic design. How can data help you? How can you start collecting data to make better decisions in the future, to grow and build a new product or service, to differentiate yourself from the market? And then sometimes we work with companies purely on the data collection and processing side of things. Do you have a data dictionary? How is data being stored? Do you have your cloud infrastructure built out? How can you scale as you start collecting more data? That alone can be a project for someone. Some of those more advanced analytics and analyzing data, yeah, maybe you're using Tableau or Excel or some others. Not everything needs to be Python and heavy GPU focus. It can be a whole broad range of things to help companies make decisions. We had a student do a really interesting visualizations project with the airport in Halifax, and that's because they ship $330 million of lobster every year. They're a critical part of our overall supply chain as it relates to aquaculture. And so she was working with them on trying to look at event detection and planning, and it was all a visualization. And the key thing here is the company or the organization, which is the airport, has great tech people, but they have great tech people focused on operating and making sure that airport can continue to go. So having a student come in and work on something that's incremental, that people understand and can use, but don't have the time for, gives a little extra bench strength to some of those companies. And so we work with companies on trying to find a whole range of types of projects and opportunities so that you as a student could get a chance to work on something. Now, networking. Some of the other things we're really interested too is trying to make sure we can help you grow your network. And I shared in the chat as well some of our different connection points. We have LinkedIn, which is great. And if you don't have a LinkedIn account, I highly recommend that you create one and you take time and actually think through and be thoughtful about what you put in there for information purposes. You definitely need to include where you've studied, what you've studied, and any jobs that you've had or volunteer experiences. And the other big thing that I almost always say to students and others is never send an invite on LinkedIn to someone without an introduction and a reason why. So you can connect with someone. Let's say you and I met at an event and walked away and I had a really good experience. And I said, message me on LinkedIn. Well, absolutely connect with me. You don't have to send me a message. But if I've never met you before and you connect with me, what's the point? So you want to make sure that you're really thinking strategically about how you grow your network and who you're connecting with. We have a whole range of other partners that are here in Atlantic, Canada, that are all about trying to grow the ocean sector and ocean tech. And so we try to connect students with all of their events as well. So maybe we're not making an exact direct introduction today, but if you attend and follow us and follow along with some of these partners, including Cove, Ignite Labs, Volta, Tech Newfoundland, Digital Nova Scotia, and other meetup groups, you'll get a chance to start growing your network and meet people who might turn into relationships in the future, could introduce you to people. You can help them. And that's the biggest thing too, is you want to make sure it's two-sided. It's not just you benefiting from this relationship. We've recently launched a Flash mentorship program, and this is in partnership with Surge, which is a lab, a sandbox, at Dalhousie as well. And what we're looking for is a broad range of students. Now, maybe 2 years from now, if you graduate and have a job, you could then reach back and become a mentor to someone else. And this is all about trying to introduce people to a broad range of others. Finding someone who might have like interests, like ideas, and you get a chance to really get to know them. But the big thing about this is we're specifically looking for people to have a quick Flash mentorship program. We don't want you to actually build out a relationship and expect that you're going to be with someone for a year. It's all about a high level. Can you meet someone? And maybe you have some shared or like interests that you can work with them on. So it's really important that you get a chance to meet people, but you meet people with a specific topic in mind, that when you introduce yourself to them, you specifically say, hi, my name is, I wanted to connect with you because I see that you have an experience in this, and that is really interesting to me because I am really interested in doing this with that. So you want to have a very clear line of sight that helps them understand why you're interested in meeting with them. We host discovery sessions kind of like today, and we're really focused on three critical pieces. Obviously, ocean data. We're ocean AI people, but ocean data is so vast and no one is the expert in everything. But we can cover off topics like AIS data, which is kind of the tracking data or location data for vessels out in the ocean. Maybe we're talking about acoustic data, so underwater sensors. We want you to learn a little about the types of data. We're not expecting you to be an expert, but it's really great to learn about different types of data and how it can be used. We also will introduce you to ocean sector companies. So maybe they'll talk a little about what they're doing, but then they'll share information about what they're looking for when they hire people, what kind of skill sets you should have, and how you can differentiate yourself when you apply to their positions. And then the last piece that's most important to us, of course, is AI and machine learning. We want you to learn fundamentals, concepts, applications, models, ideas, approaches, how to evaluate. You can find a bunch of our past sessions on our YouTube playlist, and please go back, watch those at leisure. You can download them and listen to just the audio files for some of them, but be sure to have to check them out because you might find some really interesting things. And the other thing is, since you're here today too, we want to know more about what you want to learn about. We can easily arrange discussions and topics for a broad range of topics, but without you telling us what you really want to know, we'll end up kind of trying to guess. And so if there's certain things you're interested in, we are absolutely happy to try to arrange to have a session on that topic. One other thing the team has done, which is incredible, is we built out a pile of different self-directed training projects. Now, this isn't like a Kaggle competition where you go, you download the data, you look at the problem. We've already written all of the Python notebooks. So the questions and the answers are already there. Please never take this and hand it in as an assignment as if it's your own, because that would be terrible and you'll get caught. But this is if you're thinking, I really want to learn a little bit more about regressions or natural language processing or time series data. How do you analyze it? What's the structure? How can I look at it? And so these projects are built out so you can go through the steps with us and try to understand it yourself. I highly recommend going through some of these experiences because it just gives you a chance to get exposed to new ways of thinking and even maybe some of their best practices of writing your own code and how to use Python. Now, one of the things we also get asked is what kind of courses should I take if I want to look at doing some DeepSense projects in the future, or if I want to be a data scientist focused on AI and ML. Here are a list of some examples of types of projects you can consider. And so one flag that we want to say is if you work with us in the future on a project, we typically need to have some kind of a researcher who helps support your project. And that's because if we're looking for funding, the researcher needs to be an applicant with that funding. One flag, though, is if you want to do a machine learning project, but you've never taken a machine learning course, it's going to be really hard because it means you might not know the concepts. But then also when we approach that faculty member to say, are you willing to work with a student? They're going to look to see if you've taken their course before. And if you haven't, then they might not want to necessarily work with you because it'll be too much of a learning curve for you. The other thing is sometimes we've had some faculty members say, oh, they took my course. I don't remember them. That means they didn't stand out. They didn't work really hard. I don't think I want to work with them because they might not work hard enough for me. And so part of it is making sure that if there's a certain area or topic you want to do well in, do super well in that course with that faculty member so you can build a good relationship with them, because they're going to be the ones who help you become a bigger expert in that area that you're really interested and focused on. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but find a course or two that you really enjoy and excel at it. That is where you should invest your time. Industry introductions, another thing here to think about. And I mentioned this last night when we had a session too. We will easily and gladly introduce you to someone if it makes sense. We will absolutely make an introduction if you were to write to us and say, DeepSense, I'm a student in X. I've been researching this company. I haven't researched this person. I really want to meet them. Can you help introduce me? Here's why I want to meet them. And here's why they should want to meet me. If you can give us a really good, clear example about what value you can bring to that person and why you want to meet with that person, we absolutely will make an introduction. It's all about growing your network and meeting new people and learning new ideas. As a student, you have a bit of a license because sometimes when you work for another company, people think there's a hidden agenda. As a student, the only thing they think you're looking for right now is a job. But if you reinforce that you're looking to do something of interest, maybe you want to try to help them. Maybe they're a company that's trying to develop their skills or they're growing a new market in something and you have an area of expertise that you can offer up some services to work with them so you can learn a little more about them. There's a way to make it a win-win relationship, and it's all about understanding companies, understanding their opportunities, and paying attention. On our LinkedIn page, on our Ocean Data page as well, and other places, we often share events from other companies. We're going to share their profiles, we share career opportunities. So if you follow along as you start understanding the language people use, the types of job descriptions that are out there, and then when you're ready to apply for those jobs, you're going to start seeing them and you can apply yourself. But if you start tracking them now, you're going to see what skill sets and experience they're looking for, and then you can start building out your resume and make sure your resume will actually answer and apply and look like you fit the role that they've described. So as a takeaway, we're going to open up to Q&A in a sec, but as a takeaway, these are the big things that we can do to help you. It's a broad range of support. We're here to help you, but remember, you have to step forward and put the effort in yourself first, and we'll gladly meet you halfway and support you. We'd love it if you followed us. We have social media, check us out. And we also have a QR code, which I'll leave there for a second in case you want to scan that for our link tree. But we're absolutely happy to have you join us through all of our different types of platforms. And we have a newsletter as well with Lucia posted in the chat feature. And you can find a bit of a piece there. So please feel free to connect with us. And I'm going to just one second. So thank you for joining. And I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording because what I want to do is open this up to questions.